Wow.
Well, no, I'm not going to repeat what you just said just before we went on air.
Me?
But I will say this: Gary may be watching.
But more on that later.
More on that
later. Right. There's a fuckload going on in the world of football, so we are back again. Every fixture in the Premier League got released today. We may have 24, 25 new articles up on the website for you to use, peruse, and abuse. We have Jimi here talking today about the midfield. Do you know the way midfielders are all listed as strikers in Premier League football? Or sorry, the strikers are listed as midfielders. What Jimmy's been doing is Jimi has been looking at the midfielders and forwards and our point structure against the FPL and players that are actually forwards who are incorrectly listed as midfielders. Do you know the things we hate about fantasy football? And then we have Gary's little watching corner where who are we talking about today? Aston Villa and West Ham? West Ham.
Today, it is. It's West Ham and Villa today. And I think there might be some arguments, particularly on the Villa side. So, yeah. Fair. Looking forward to that.
And later on Gary's voyeur corner. Anyway, Jimi, talk to me. Until we have a better name, that's what I'm calling it. I don't care.
That's what we're calling it. It's going to stick. It's going to stick.
So, apart from hey Gary, hope you're doing well there from the bushes outside my house. Also, Dino is here, and that's an event all on its own. Very attentive listeners will realize that it's Wednesday, not Monday, and before any of these heroes tries to jump on that grenade, that's entirely my fault because I went out, wrote myself off at the 9 Inch Nails gig on Sunday night, and it was bloody fantastic. But apologies for the delay in getting back on to you, everybody. So, we need to talk about positions, right? And this one is like, this feels a little bit like...
already.
I don't know if it's sexy. I think it's going to be a little bit divisive. So apologies in advance to anybody who suffers blood pressure problems in the comments down below. But we have got a bit of a position problem. And it's been going on for so long that it has just kind of become accepted and has become part of Fantasy Premier League. And with all due respect to our big cousin and our alma mater next door, it's something that we desperately want to fix at Statr, because the tactical choices are silly. Stop me if any of this sounds familiar, okay? Salah, Palmer, Mbeumo, De Bruyne, and a floater as your 5 in the midfield. Put on as many of them as possible, maybe Jacob Murphy, someone in 5 to 6 million. Put on all of them, many of them as possible, knowing the 3 of them are out and out forwards. Saka would be there if he wasn't injured instead of Palmer. And then out front, because there's like 6 players left listed as forwards, everybody has Cunha, everybody has Isaac, and then there's a little bit of rotation between maybe Lewis, Diaz. Nope, he's a midfielder as well.
Oh, it would be Chris
Watkins,
Wood and Jimenez. Chris Wood and Jimenez were the other two.
Not Jimenez. That's your Fulham is showing. It would have
been
Chris
he was
Wood
a heavy rotation.
Watkins.
Himself and Chris Wood were 2 heavy rotation players last year for teams.
Nobody likes Fulham except you. Anyway, the point stands. There were very, very few valid forward options. So almost everybody ended up playing a 3-5-2 or even a 4-5-1, because what was left over as strikers have had decreasing returns against their incredibly inflated costs, which, by the way, don't quite follow their own rules. I see you, Erling Haaland, the week you got injured and everybody transferred you out and your price didn't move for some reason, poster boy of FA. And the midfield is absolutely loaded with these guys who aren't actually midfielders. So what we're going to be doing differently is we're going to be going by Opta, which is a company that does stats properly. And they have correctly listed everybody in the right places, right? So what I wanted to have a look at, and surprisingly enough, you can read the results at, John, what's it called?
StatrDraft.com.
StatrDraft.com.
I'm not doing too many of those today.
Well, no, we kind of drove that one into the ground a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I had a look at the numbers because that's what I do here in my green zone that I am now sealed into. I look at the numbers and I see who were the midfielders that made the top 10 for the year with our system, but didn't make the top 10 for the year in FPL. In other words, they are mathematically, technically underrated players that you should be keeping an eye on if you're making the move over to Big Boy Draft League this year. Couple of things to get out of the way at the top, right? There's a couple of very obvious ones. We've named a couple of them already. Cole Palmer obviously did well in both, so that's a nailed-on pick for last year. Not sure about this year. That's okay. The problem is Mbeumo, Salah, and Saka are taking up not only midfielder slots, but key Premier League team spots. So there are players on this list that I've devised that nobody's going to pick in FPL because you don't want to take up a Liverpool slot. Or nobody's going to take up an FPL because you've got out-of-position strikers. Like, this has been a problem for years. This goes back to the fact that Premier League have their fantasy game rooted in 1989 when everything was 4-4-2. 4-4-2. You got 4 backs, 4 midfielders, 2 strikers, and the midfielders do a little bit of running, and everybody kicks the shit out of each other.
Yeah, because the big problem is the outside midfielders, and the way I always try to define it is if a team plays, it was to play a 4-4-2, are they players that will play in the 2 up front, or are they the guys that will play on the outside of the midfield? Now, that means that players like your Saka, your Salah, your Mbuemo, they're forwards, they're inside forwards, they're not outside midfielders, wide midfielders, wingers, if you want to call it. But like, I don't know. Like for me, the whole thing with the midfield forward thing is when you look at the forwards over the other side of the house, it's so fucking limited. There's like 5 people, maybe 6 on a good day that you could pick from, and you're always looking for that one guy like Liam Delap last year, the guy that comes from a promoted team that you can hang your hat on and go at 5.5 points. He's going to play for the first 5-6 weeks. And because they've got a promotion bounce, he might pick up a couple of goals. And then we see where the form takes us around week 6, week 7, when people start to use their first half season wildcard, when the dust starts to settle and you know how far off. If you've already lost or not for the year at 6 weeks in, let's be honest here. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. And, you know, that's fine for football. If it's just about watching football and people having the wrong names on things, that shit doesn't matter. But this game matters because it's about facts and numbers and accuracy. So part of the problem is that it's historical thinking, right? Part of the problem, as was raised in the comment sections on our TikTok during the week, is that your wingers are kind of one thing or they're another. But here's my thinking on this, right? Wingers in FPL are getting points for clean sheets. Like, to say that fellas who spend their entire life running up the far side of the pitch to get lashing crosses or delivered into the box themselves are doing as much defensive work as DMs, who are horrifically overlooked, as we all know, is nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. So what we've done at Statr is we have redefined the winger as a forward because it makes sense and that's how they're used and they have the skills and attributes in place. So having a look at the top 10, it is a drastically different top 10 once you get past the first few. The obvious two, Cole Palmer and the only reason that Man United are a Premier League team, Bruno Fernandes, are both in the top 10 in both. That's absolutely grand, right? I'm going to give you 5 names now, guys. 6 names now, guys. 7 names now, guys. And half of them are DMs, depending on how you squint, right? Because what happened in the FPL top 10 is Luis Diaz, Salah, and Mbuemo, they just got in the way. They took up all the slots. Who's actually performing? All right. Has anybody not read the article? Brilliant. Dino, have a stab. Have a stab. Give us a...
The actual best defensive midfielder taken out.
Not defensive, just midfielders that are actually midfielders, made our top 10, didn't make FPLs.
Oh, Jesus. Trying to think of my own team last year was probably going to help.
Your team is not traditionally where the best players are found.
It's so true.
McAllister?
But you did draft one of them.
Oh, did I? McAllister?
Great guess. Absolutely correct. Yes. Alexis McAllister, who is a DM technically, but he's starting to move back into that box-to-box thing.
So where did he end up? I think he was like, what, 6th on your list?
He landed up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7th.
7th. So I think, given the season that he had, right? If you were over on any of the other platforms or any of the other leading guys, you're not picking him. As you said, that's a slot that's getting taken up. If you were taking 3 Liverpool players, you're probably taking Alisson in goals, you're taking Salah, and then it's
Virgil.
one.
It's either Virgil or Trent last year.
Virgil or Trent.
Or Luis Diaz, if you were paying attention the last 2 months when Salah was taking a little bit of a breather. But you're sure as hell not taking...
But you're not taking anyone in that midfield.
But you're also not looking at players like him, the guys who keep the game moving. You take McAllister out of that Liverpool team last year. They suffer without him. But in terms of fantasy sports, he's a non-entity, which to me is fucking ridiculous.
Yep, absolutely right. And the beauty of McAllister is that he's just come off a year where, and again, stop me if I go wrong here, he was a box-to-box player when he was with Brighton. And then he went into a more DM role last year with Liverpool because their DM, Fabinho, was a bit shit. And then he's back to the box-to-box thing this year and he's doing better again, which is probably why Szoboszlai also made the top 10 with us. Because those two between them, like, they're so important to that Liverpool season. They're so, like, move the ball from back to front, take it off the guys at the back. I mean, it's quite simple, but it's what they're best at. Gary, go on, have a guess. Who else is in there?
I was gonna say Gravenberch, but probably not. But I'm gonna take a stab at Caicedo.
Great guess. Incorrect though. Chelsea just didn't have enough space for him, but it was another Chelsea midfielder in the top 10.
But that's the
Anybody
obvious
else?
Or probably
one.
Enzo then. It was probably
That's
Enzo
gonna
then.
It's Enzo.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
sorry,
Enzo.
but I still regret that transfer this season. That's the worst thing
Yeah.
I did this season. He had done
Terrible mistake.
No, don't get me wrong. I'll stand by the timing of which I did it. I did the right thing. He had done absolutely nout, and then and I swapped him for Brennan Johnson, who was banging him in. I think he did 8 games on the trot, scoring a goal every game, and I got him on like the 4th week of that. So but I got him on the 4th week of that. So at the time, on a short window, I had made the right call. But from the following week onwards, from the moment I transferred Enzo, he just started spraying the ball, just dominating midfield. And it's
And
mad
so completely
because I'm so
fixture-proof.
thinking about it. Brendan Johnson fell off a cliff after he hit lightning, and then I was watching him prop up someone else's team for the rest of the year.
Well, Johnson was playing on an objectively terrible team, whereas Chelsea were up and down. And people seem to have forgotten that if you're around Halloween to Christmas, Chelsea are chasing Liverpool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it didn't last. Everybody took a shot at the crown, but it didn't last. But Enzo's completely fixture-proof. It doesn't matter how well they're doing, how well they're not. It doesn't matter whether like his heat map is basically just a big white rectangle. He's everywhere. I'm surprised he's not saving penalties. Like, the guy's phenomenal. Now, there's 2 in here who are technically midfielders, but I think you could see some recategorization. It's Jared Bowen and Kevin Shada. Bowen is really moving more and more into that attacking winging thing, and Shada is kind of an attacking midfielder, but we were talking about this, and those 2 are in as midfielders. They're kind of somewhere between AM and wing. But the really interesting 3, one of them has a very special place in my heart this season, because, Dino, you drafted another one of our top 10 midfielders, but you did not finish the season with him.
Struggling to even think.
It's more. Yeah.
Morgan Gibbs-White. Yeah.
Morgan Gibbs-White. And the other is Thomas Souček.
Souček, who is an out-and-out DM. Souček is at West Ham what Tarkovsky is at Everton. Yeah, he's like, they're not going to do well, but he is. He's got the stats, guys, the interceptions, the aerials, the clearances, the key passes. He's not getting assists. He's not knocking in bicycle kicks, but he's grafted. And he's controlling that midfield as best anyone can playing for West Ham. Gibbs-White, obviously, a little bit of a complex one there, because he was very much an attacking midfielder at the start of the season. He's been dropping further and further back as the season went on, which I think if they're smart, they'll stop doing, because the results reflected that it wasn't working towards the end of the season. So he's kind of half a DM as well. Hard to see where, like, he's a big question mark for me next year, if I'm honest, because Forest are a big question mark. That could have been their one season, or this could be the beginning of a dynasty that lasts 1,000 years. There's no way to know.
Nah, they're in trouble next year. We'll get on to it when we get over to their week on Gary's Boyer Corner. But no, I think the thing with Newcastle, themselves in Newcastle, are going to have a very similar problem, that their squad depth isn't that big when it comes to competing on a European front as well. So if they want to make waves in Europe, their Premier League form is going to suffer, especially after the away days, because in the Conference League, you're going to be traveling to some fucking awful places on a Thursday night. Here, do you want to go into the North Hemisphere part of fucking Norway, play on an AstroTurf pitch at 10 p.m. at night, and then fly home and have a match in 36 hours after you land? Nah, fucking thank you. The thing is, the bigger teams have the squad capacity for that. That's why Chelsea, Cole Palmer didn't even play in Europe for Chelsea until the knockout rounds. He wasn't even registered. They went, we're so much better than this competition. Stay at home during the week, big boy, rest up for the Prem.
Yep, and look, it was the right move for most of the season.
Yep.
To finish out our 10, and this one is very, very complex and has to be handled very sensitively. They're a team we've had a little bit to say about. He's a player who some in Ireland might not be hugely fond of.
No.
I'm feeling it was him,
But Jack Grealish, no, I'm kidding. At 11 points per game last season.
Jack Grealish is one to
Rice.
keep an eye out. By the way, before you get onto it, Jack Grealish is one to watch.
Only if you're a bouncer.
It isn't in America right now. It's City on the way getting sold. If he ends up, but probably we're going to touch on that, I suppose, in Gary's corner.
We'll touch on that.
We'll get there. And I don't want to pull any rugs out on people moving around. But yeah, Declan Rice, 11 points per game last year. And again, it's that thing of I hate to make it emotional instead of statistical, but I think it's about passion. I think it's about the list. This list of players are not the ones you see posing for Instagram and doing little ads for perfume. These are the lads who get in a pitch and throw their absolute back and balls into every game.
Yeah.
That seems to be the pattern here. Okay, a couple of them, I mean, Bruno Fernandes can be a bit, but these are the guys who are getting stuck in. And I'm glad to see that our system is recognizing and rewarding defensive
Dean
play.
just got upset.
Fuck, you're right, Bruno Fernandes. Like, I mean, he waved his arm around a lot, but he's definitely not.
He's a workhound.
Like,
He is.
He's an absolute workhound.
Yeah,
but I can't resist an opportunity to wind Dean up. He's also the second highest scoring midfielder in Statr last year.
Can I ask
just
one question?
barely behind Palmer.
Can I ask one question? Where's my favorite player of the season? Where the fuck is he?
Mitrovic.
No,
Alex
Iwobi.
Alex Iwobi, right? Now, I need to be very, very clear on this, right? There's a pack of about...
He just left him off to hurt me. That's the reality.
And there isn't 10 points between them. He is 1.5 points behind Bruno Gummi and 1.5 points ahead of Kaoru Mitoma for the year. So he did absolutely fine. The thing you've got to remember with draft, right? If you're playing FPL, only the top 10 or 15 players for the season matter. Because everybody's going to pick the same fucking team. Because past a certain point, you have to keep up. When you're drafting and everybody needs 6 or 7 midfielders and you've got 10 of your mates, suddenly everyone in the top 100 becomes a viable player. So while Iwobi didn't quite make the dizzying heights, he landed just outside the top 20. Just outside the top 20 for a midfielder is a 3rd or 4th round pick in a clever league. So don't write him off. The crucial thing here is, as we start publishing more and more stats on our sims for last year, and as you start playing the app this year, keep an eye further down the ladder. I got to 3 finals this season by constantly picking up form players.
What'd you win, though, Jim?
Didn't win anything. Didn't win anything. We'll never win anything. I know. But in fairness...
So your strategy is nailed on.
Yeah, I know. But look, second place in everything isn't bad. Just ask Arsenal. The strategy for me was keep changing and keep watching and keep tinkering and drop fellas and pick fellas up. I only ended up with 3 players that I drafted at the start of the season. And it's because I'm watching numbers like this. I know less about football than anybody else in this league. I finished top of the table and finished second in all 3 competitions. So it works. If you're a numbers guy, this is how the game is played. You keep an eye on what's happening further down. You see a Gibbs White start to score goals for a Forest before anybody else does, you jump on him. You see him get a red card and get suspended for 1 week and then drop him in a tantrum, you're going to finish last, Dean. Stop doing that stuff, Dean. You're better than that, Dean. But anyway, there's a lot to be said about looking further down the ladder because you're going to be picking until 187 players are picked in an 11-man league. So keep an eye further down the ladder. Iwobi did okay. He did better than Mitoma. He didn't do as well as more of the Brentford mids, actually. Norgard and Damsgaard both right ahead of him. Then you move up, it's Ouattara, Anderson, Eze, Murphy, Kluivert is who else is in the top 20 there. But they're not the names you'd expect because we are so long hearing that everybody that isn't standing in the penalty box is a midfielder. And if you don't do anything other than goals, you don't do anything. This is how we change the game.
Yeah, and like, to be fair, it aligns with an overall view of football over the last few years. Like nobody can argue that Leicester wouldn't have won their Premier League without Kante in the middle. Right. Caicedo and McAllister were phenomenal for Brighton that year when they got into Europe. There's reasons why these players are loved as Premier League players and have made big moves and are still having fantastic seasons for their teams. But to see that reflected in a proper fantasy football game now.
What's a shame is that Rodri was injured all year because I think flagging him throughout the year would have been he'd have been the obvious one where we could sit back, literally hanging in the loof and just go, see, we've proved our point. He's the poster.
But he was my second round draft pick last year because the previous season he carried Jimi to, I think, second place again, but he scored some serious points for Jimi in the previous season. That's the only reason I remember it because I was so gutted when he did his knee.
It was
Was
Dermot.
it
I
you
never
or was
have
it Dermot? It was one of you. I can't remember.
I don't draft City.
It was one of you.
And
That's a
he
fair
made a
tactic.
fortune off him. You know?
Oh, that would have probably been Dermot. A little bit of Hispanic
Yeah.
flavor into his team. Yeah, it's a pure Dermot.
But again, there is value to be had there in DMs, and as you say, Jimmy, further down the list, like if you look at someone like Tonali coming into the end of the season last season, I know he didn't do much across the whole. He didn't do much across the whole season, but at the end of it, everyone was trying to get him from me coming into the playoffs because he was hitting some serious form.
So Tonali, despite having been in and out, finished in the top 40, right in the dot. Number 40th ranked midfielder this season. And again, if anybody's listening going, why do I care about the 40th ranked midfielder? If there are 8 people in your league, he's getting picked. So keep an eye on this stuff, guys. So some real surprises, like some of the attacking guys aren't doing anything but attacking. Not that attacking is bad, but it seems like it's all they do. Like some of these are way, way low down. Kobbie Mainoo, Sarabia, although he was injured for a while as well. Bit disappointed, to be honest, that Ross Barkley didn't come good this season again. He's one of those always there guys. He's like the plastic plates you get when the kids are small and then you never end up throwing out. You just kind of assume he's always there.
Great for a slice of toast, like, is it?
Yeah, but that's it.
Those plastic plates and a 1 p.m. slice of toast. Done.
You know what's great, though, is Rodri, as you mentioned him, finished just behind Mykhailo Mudryk this season. And without wanting to discuss anything that's in the news today, I will say City will have Rodri back next season. So I know which one I'd rather pick. But that's it. That's it on the midfielders. Next week, I'm going to be looking at forwards. Again, it's going to be a little bit complicated because so many of what we call forwards, the other game calls midfielders. But it's going to be really, really interesting to look at. It's going to be up on StatrDraft.com sometime early next week.
StatrDraft.com.
StatrDraft.com. But that's it from the stats table for me this week. And yeah.
Okay, so I guess it's time to push your chair into the corner of the room, dim the lights, and Gary.
I swear that's some intro. That is so. We're coming up with a better name than the Voyeur Corner for next.
GVC, Gary's Voyeur Corner. Pull your chair into the corner of the room, dim the lights, and listen to the sultry voice. Talk about Aston Villa and West Ham.
I do have a sexy voice, to be fair. But anyway, we'll move swiftly on.
We're gonna have to come up with a better name, but I'm just gonna.
I'm gonna
run these jokes every week until we do.
Either that, or let's just set us up on an OnlyFans account and make some money off it. But anyway, for those of us. Yeah, sorry, Jimmy's reaction just got me there. So for those of us who were here last week, what we're doing is we're looking at 2 teams per week. We're looking at players to pick up, ones to maybe not avoid, because as we're going into this, there's to Jimmy's point, when you're drafting and you're looking at players in the top 100 and 120, it's kind of hard to look at players and go, you'll avoid them unless they're doing absolutely nothing and they're obvious. So we're going to look at ones that you might consider not drafting if they, there might be an emotional connection to, etc. And then we look for wildcard. We do love an L wildcard. Those players who deliver but might not be the sexiest player that you consider drafting in the first, second, and third rounds, but ones who deliver consistently week in, week out. And actually, we've mentioned a couple of these lads tonight already. But for tonight, we're looking at West Ham. And we're looking at Villa. So we are. And if you look at West Ham for your pick, your one player that you want to pick from West Ham, and it is quite obvious, and we've mentioned him again tonight, it is Jared Bowen. And it can't be anybody else. Now, honourable mentions for Wan-Bissaka last year. He's done quite well. But there are plenty of other better defender options out there ahead of him, and Bowen is just one of those players who consistently delivers. Last year, he's durable as well. So he played 34 games last year, averages between 34, 35 games over the last 3 seasons. He's been West Ham's highest ranked player over the last 3 seasons as well. 13 goals.
Enough to get picked up by a bigger team, or do you think he's at the level he's at?
I think he's going to be another Mark Noble. I think he suits West Ham. I think that's just his vibe. He's also marrying Danny Dyer, one of the probably the West Ham fan's daughter. Have you not seen
Yeah.
that quote? That was hilarious. it was like, I'd probably beat up every guy my daughter's ever brought home, but with this guy, I'd probably slip him back in. It's terrible. Genuinely,
That sounds like something that Danny Dyer would say, to
an
be fair.
actual Danny Dyer quote. Like, but I think he's
Yeah,
going to be another Mark Noble. He's just going to become part of the furniture down there.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere. I think he enjoys his life down there. He wants to become a club legend. He probably could move to a bigger club. And I know Liverpool were sniffing around him a couple of seasons ago, but
I think that's when he needed to move. I think because he didn't move at that time, his age profile, the cost that's going to take to extract him, it's kind of similar situation to, let's say, Eze at Palace. He's in that kind of late 20s age bracket, and the cost that the team's going to ask for him. What are you going to pay to extract Jarrod Bowen from West Ham? 60? Are any of the big teams going to pay that?
No. What was he? 28, 29? And yeah. So you're not paying that. He is there, but I actually think he's happy to be there for all of the reasons that we've spoken about. And I think from a draft perspective, he averages about between 11 and 12 points. He averaged 11.4 last season. We've spoken about it. Yes, he is a midfielder, and traditionally he is that kind of central midfield outside right. He has been playing further up the pitch, and certainly did last year for West Ham, which ultimately gets him
for a lot of last season. Actually,
he played for he did. He played a lot. He played a lot as a number 9 because of the problems with Antonio, and then Fulkrug wasn't doing it.
I think they'd be mental to not.
Well, this takes us on to who you avoid. This is a nice segue, because you have to avoid anyone who plays up front for West Ham. So I'm not picking a specific player here. I'm looking at Ferguson. I'm looking at Fulkrug. Antonio has been released, but they're actually talking about bringing him back. West Ham do not have any decent strikers at the moment.
Have you seen the stat that they have signed in the last 10 years, like 19 or 21 forwards? It's one of those two numbers. It's either 19 or 21. And we're talking the highest goal scoring return from any of them is Mikel Antonio.
Yeah. And Antonio is not coming back from. I don't think he's coming back from that serious injury. I hope he does, because I actually quite like Antonio. He's done well for me in the past.
He's the amazing combination of seems across a really down to earth, genuinely lovely young man who is also a monster from hell on the pitch if you're trying to mark him.
Yeah.
He came off the bench for Jamaica the other night, by the way.
Really?
Brilliant.
I'm delighted to hear that. Yeah, glad to hear that.
Actually delighted to hear that.
Like 10 minutes.
But whether or not he can do the business from a draft perspective, probably not. West Ham are also in the market for a new striker, and they are looking at a lad from Villarreal called Tierno Berry, who has scored 11 or 12 goals last season in Spain. So they are looking for somebody up front. So you avoid Fulkrug, you avoid Ferguson. John, I know you had a soft spot for Fulkrug last year because you drafted him.
Look. I'm just going to spell it out here. If there's a centre forward that comes from basically anywhere Nordic, Germany, Eastern Bloc, I want 6 foot plus.
They're not all Mitrovic.
No,
they cannot
Jordan Peterson for you.
Look, Weghorst, love him. Peter Crouch, love him. Kenwyn Jones, I'd hug that man if I met him. The man was a monster. Mitrovic is obviously possibly my favorite fucking player of all time. I don't give a bollocks. Still disappointed nobody got their big boy pants on and bought the psychopath. And Nicholas Fulkrug is a German cult hero. His career didn't take off until very late. He banged them in for that couple of years at Dortmund. He was very unlucky last year that he came in and got injured basically at the very start of preseason. I would like to think with a bit of a preseason under his belt, you'll see the best of him this year. Still wouldn't draft him for a love or wank, I think he's going to be an improvement on what you saw from him this year.
No West Ham strikers, and it's been this way for years. It's been this way for years.
And I don't think he fits the Potter way of playing either. He's a big, strong centre forward. And if you look at Potter, particularly at Brighton when he was there and done well, no, let's not have the Evan Ferguson conversation again.
Yeah, look, Evan Ferguson, apparently now the latest on Evan Ferguson is that he lacks aggression, apparently. I mean, look, let's not retread old ground. But West Ham have historically not been delivering out front at all.
Sorry, it's all there's a couple of other players there to pick. There's I know, Gary, I know what you're saying, but we're obviously saying there Thomas Souček was a top 10 midfielder in our model next year.
Souček is my wildcard.
Okay. Mohamed Kudus.
Cool. So
Way
there are
down
a
the
couple of
race.
players there you do look at when you're considering West Ham, and between Wan-Bissaka and Kudus, they were ones that I was looking at as the wild card option, but Souček is the one that gets there, and the reasons Jimmy has touched on it already. If you look at the scores that he puts up, and it's not the sexy stuff, it is putting the foot in, it's the clearances, it's the aerial duels. I had a look at some of the actual numbers for this lad, and it was 101 aerial duels that he won last season. That's average of
That's
what,
insane.
2 to 3 a game. This lad wins more aerial duels in the air than Van Dijk.
Yeah,
And
he's got centre half defensive stats. He has got top
Yeah.
14 centre half defensive stats while still getting the ball going forward as well. It's just unbelievable.
It's unreal. It's unreal. So like someone like Souček drops to 5th, 6th round, you draft him. You absolutely 100% draft them, and they're the players that are going to get you to the final of your league. Last season he averaged 10.6 points per game, and there's a couple of notable players that he actually averaged higher than. Szoboszlai, for one, he was higher than Szoboszlai for average points per game. He was higher than Etsy for points per game. He was higher than Enzo for points per game. So there's some really, really big names in there that he is actually from a draft and a fantasy perspective, he is outperforming. Now, he is rumored to be leaving West Ham. There's noise around him moving, but it's within the Premier
League by where
he will be. Yeah, oh yeah. Like Everton are looking at him, Leeds are looking at him. So actually, depending on where he ends up, he may even do better. Because if he goes to an Everton or a Leeds, he's probably going to be relied on more than he is at West Ham for his defensive ability, which he clearly has.
Yeah.
So you absolutely consider him as an option when you're drafting. But yeah, they're the 3 players for West Ham. I don't know if there's anyone else that anyone else thinks of outside of.
Your same pick.
Can I throw something in there? Before you talk about him as a good player, I just want to highlight something about Mohamed Kudus, right? Mohamed Kudus, when you transfer from FPL points to our points last season, was the worst performing against his own next door performance on the West Ham squad. And that's because Mohamed Kudus is dispossessed more than any other player in the Premier League. He had the ball taken off his incompetent feet 93 times last season in 32 games. So 3 times a game, he was put in someone's pocket. Now, they don't punish that kind of thing next door because it's a little too complicated. We do. If the other fella makes a fool of you, you're losing points. So I would put Kudus on the flush list there, John, to be honest with you, because that doesn't strike me as the kind of thing that a grown-ass professional footballer
I think
is
if he
going
moves
to
to one of the bigger teams, which is where he could be rumored to be going.
Where's he heading?
There's been a few rumors floating around, like Chelsea being one. I think Arsenal were another. I think Villa were another that were potentially looking at him because they've obviously sent Mr. Marcus Rashford home, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a moment. So if he goes to one of those bigger I think Newcastle have also been attributed with interest in him. I think for Newcastle, it's kind of between him and Zhao for which one of the 2 boys they buy.
As well as Van Hecke, of course, per yesterday's rumor.
You're not buying both of them. I think that's the reason why one of them is leaving.
Yeah, but you'd wonder whether Kudus can actually make that jump.
I think he can. I think in a bigger team.
I don't know.
I think in a bigger team, it's that thing of like if you think about it, like when Jack Grealish was at Villa, he lost an awful lot of football, but he got an awful lot of football and had to be very influential when he had it. You know what I mean? At West Ham, they have to give him the ball so often because it's him or Jarrett Bowen. And if Jarrett Bowen is playing as number 9, someone has to get the ball to Jarrett Bowen, which is Kudus. So when they had
but Jack Grealish was actually able to do something with the ball when he got it at Villa. Hence why he moved it.
If you're that guy that is the only out ball for the team, then you're going to get dispossessed quite a lot because you're going to see an awful lot. I'd say if you looked at Jack Grealish's dispossession numbers around his last 2 years of Villa, they're probably equally as high.
Well, that'd be fine, except Bowen has 50% more shots on target, 20% fewer dispossessions. So, who's doing the do at West Ham? Jarrett Bowen. Not Kudus. Yeah. And there's a reason. It's because Kudus he might be a good player, but as yet, We have not devised a fantasy system wherein he is a good fantasy player. And many companies have tried. Nothing's working.
So I think we're adding.
So it must be everyone else's fault. I'm sure he'll do.
So
great
are we adding
fantasy.
kudos to the avoid list? I think probably.
No. It's your list. Don't me ruin things and have you have to come out from behind the
ignore
curtain.
West Ham centre forward and wildcard a Suchek.
Pretty much, yeah.
I think
absolutely.
we should put these in little articles on the site, little draft guide articles by each club.
On which site?
StatrCast.com. That's 3. I'm done. I have no more to give.
Yeah, you're done.
Yeah,
that's it.
That's it.
That's your
3.
Moving on then to Villa. So Villa are one of these teams that you kind of look at and you go, there's actually a lot of quality in there. There's a lot of players in there who will actually do you quite well. And when I was looking at kind of who your top picks were, two players stood out. Neither of them are Ollie Watkins. We'll get onto that in a second. But if you're looking at players to pick, you're looking at Morgan Rogers and you're looking at Yuri Tielemans. I think they're the two that you look at. The reason you don't look at Watkins is, again, there are some better options out there from a striker perspective, but for Rogers in particular. 8 goals, 10 assists across 37 games, averaging 8.2 points per game, and that is third highest for last season. That was actually behind Tielemans. The only reason you don't pick him is he may be moving on in the summer. Now it's a question of where he moves to. Yeah, there's a lot of big European clubs looking at him because he's young, and there's a lot of teams apparently in the Premier League looking at him because he's young and he's English. But if you actually look at the numbers between Rogers and Tielemans, they're actually very, 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 very similar. The difference is Tielemans does the dirty stuff quite well, whereas Rogers, everything seems to move through him for Villa.
What's the story here, right? So I'm seeing a lot of this. 40 million is the buying price for Morgan Rogers. That's a dude. That's.
Oh, you throw money at Villa for that. That's his buy. I think that's his release clause.
40 is the price to get Morgan Rogers. I think you do. I think if you're any team that if you're Arsenal right now, you do that deal. He's an upgrade on there. If you're Liverpool, he improves off that side. People might disagree with that, but I think he'd go in on that left-hand side over there. I think if you're Chelsea, he improves that side of the pitch. I think if you're United, it would be stupid not to. 40 million for Morgan Rogers. The other side of this, I don't understand how nobody ever seems to be sniffing around Yuri Tielemans. He's played very well for a very long length of time and never seems to get the claps for it.
Because he's made of biscuits and gets very easily injured, and I spent an awful lot of time injured. But he's brilliant. He's absolutely brilliant. He's been brilliant since he was at Leicester.
Season now, and he was a starter in my lineup for I'd say nearly fucking won the whole season. Like he was reliable for the entire season for me. Like so, I thought I don't know. Yeah, you have to look into him.
Well, last season he was pretty reliable. He played 36 games, but to be fair to Jimmy, before that, the previous 2 seasons he was a little bit made of glass. And that's kind of why I was looking at Rogers more than Tielemans when I was like, if you had to make a decision between the two, it's Rogers, because Rogers is 22. He's played 37 games last year in the league.
It's that thing. Traditionally, you can see Rogers getting better. I think Tielemans has got to where he's got to.
Well, yeah, exactly. This is exactly it.
So he's going to improve as well. But Dean, I do have a question for you. If you're in Aston Villa shoes right now, right, and you have 2 of these outside left-hand side players to pick from, and they're Jack Grealish and Marcus Rashford, which one are you picking, Dean?
I mean, they're both injury prone, so that doesn't really help the.
Are they injury prone, or are they just piss heads?
I'd probably go with Rashford, because his output is still better than Grealish's, even though his output isn't great. But Grealish, like this season, has just been. No, he didn't get any game time or anything from Pep, obviously, but obviously that's because Pep probably looks at him and probably sees that he's not going to help City in their goals. So I would, I'd probably be going with Rashford, to be honest. I don't know. There's something about Grealish.
Yeah.
Something about but like you said as well, like Rashford does enjoy going on a night out, as he's perfectly entitled to as well. Like, but Grealish has been like that since his Villa days, and I don't think he's really going to change. Like I think that Rashford has put in some numbers over the years, and he's still young that he could get back to that level. But I
He's
don't
not
think
young anymore, though.
What?
He's not young anymore, though. He's 26.
Rashford,
Yeah.
26.
But that's prime age, John.
Prime.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, he should be in his prime. He's not.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying. He has. The
Sorry, he's 27.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, he has the potential to get back to where he was before. You know, like, he still has like 5 years to go playing at top level. Like,
He's Jesse Lingard 2.0 as far as I'm concerned.
No way, he's not that bad. No,
I think he is.
No way.
That's still better. That's still better than Stephen Ireland 2.0, which is what Jack Grealish is.
Sorry, but he went to Villa last year. He scored 3 goals. 2 of them were against Preston. Like, there's a reason why fucking Prince Marcus Rashford, Aston Villa didn't want to sign him at the price of 40 million. 1, because his wages are exceptional, and 2, because
it's mostly his wages. Yeah, the reason is it's because of his wages.
And he wasn't all that good. He didn't exactly pull up trees there.
He was goals and assists. He was getting goals and assists for them, but then he got injured.
3 goals.
6 goals.
He scored 3 goals for them.
He scored 6 goals. 6 goals, 4 assists.
6 goals.
Third highest scorer for Villa last year. Now, hold on. Yeah. Sorry, that's across the whole season, so that probably includes his time at United, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. My bad.
Okay. Well, how many games did he play for Villa?
About 13, 14.
Yeah, it's a pretty even split there.
2 of his goals were against Preston.
He had 10 appearances for Villa last season, and he had 2 goals. So I mean,
against a championship team.
Yeah.
350 grand a week at a 40 million transfer fee. I wouldn't be doing it. Morgan Rodgers is long ahead of him.
Oh, well, yeah. I think we're all agreed on that. We would go Morgan Rodgers ahead of him. But, the question was Rashford or Grealish, and I would be going Rashford over Grealish.
Can you take Rashford over Grealish?
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Can I throw a statistical sleeper into the mix? Because nobody ever pays attention to defenders until it's too late. 4th highest points per game last season for Villa, despite only playing 14 games.
Tyrone Mings
is back. Tyrone Mings.
Wow.
And he's a belter.
He's a belter. He is actually my wildcard pick for Villa. Purely because he is absolutely... So, he's the club captain at Villa. So, when he is fit, he plays. And he is an absolute wall back there. You've already said it there, Jim. He averaged 8 points a game last season. And that's higher than any other Villa defender. And he is 4th highest on the team for Villa. When you look at the overall defenders as well, some of his stats are just absolutely heroic. And it's only over 14 games. His clearances, his tackles are just really, really strong. If he plays 38 games, he is up there in your top 10 defenders. You absolutely have to take him. But because he only played 14 games last year, and there are people who will literally just look at the top 50, 60, and 70 players, he's not going to be in there.
But he's also made out of cheese strings. That's the problem there. If he can stay fit.
Well, last season was the only season where he played 26, 27 games. And I think the previous one, I can't remember what it was before that. But traditionally he hits about between 25 and 30 games a season.
And when the points per game return is that high, it's okay
you have
to miss a few weeks. Yeah. You know what I mean? Well, it depends. If you're playing Draft Classic, it's okay to miss a few weeks because you're going to get his points at the end of the year. If you're playing head-to-head, it's a great way to get killed. I drafted him this year, and he promptly fucking tore off his left leg. But I think he's really.
But he's one of those players that.
Go on.
He is one of those players that in the system you can swap him in and out from a subs perspective. You don't want to drop him because if he goes on a run of 5 or 6 games fit, he could nail you about 45 points across those weeks. He can be the difference between you winning and losing if you use him correctly. So he is a consideration. He's one of those players that Villa have that you have to absolutely consider taking. If, again, drops to maybe 5th or 6th round, you'd definitely look at him. The players you avoid from Villa, though, first of all, you avoid Asensio. I knew John. I was waiting for the reaction from John. Yeah. So before you jump down my neck, John.
That's a ridiculous statement.
Before you jump down my neck, Asensio is one of these players who's a confidence player, so he will be great for 5 or 6 games, and he will look the business. And he did, to be fair, when he came in, and I remember the two of us actually drilled over Asensio on one of the podcasts. He was phenomenal. He averaged 11 to 12 points per game for the first 5 games that he played. Then he went and missed 2 penalties against Southampton. And for the next 4 games, he averaged 1.5 points per game. He is a complete confidence player. We've seen something similar with Coutinho with Villa when he came in. Looked great, looked the part, fell off the edge of a cliff. There's still no guarantee that Villa are going to take up the option to buy him from PSG, but if they do, don't get sucked into the emotional thing of, hey, there's an ex-Real Madrid player playing for Villa. I have to have him. No, you don't. There are better options. There are better options, and there are alternative options that Villa have, like Rodgers, like Malin as well, who will play some more football next season. You've got to take it. You've also got to take into account that rotation piece. So if Asensio is there, he might be kept for the European games rather than the Premier League games. Either way, you will not see, and I'll put money on this, you will not see a decent return from Asensio next season. Do not draft him.
Aston Villa are going to win the Europa League.
They might do it with Asensio in the team, but that's not going to win. That's not going to score you any fantasy points.
With Unai Emery,
draft points.
With Unai Emery in charge, Aston Villa will win the Europa League. However, you cannot be picking Villa players at that point because they're going to throw all the chips in the European basket. They're going to have the same problem as I mentioned about Palace being in Europe, and the same problem as Newcastle being in Europe, same as a few of the teams that are going to be in Europe. They're just not going to have the squad depth. And a club like Villa should have something in their trophy cabinet. Unai Emery is the ultimate Europa League manager. Remember what he did with Team 3 and 4? Like that competition is his shit. So I expect them to go all out.
But this is why you avoid, when you're looking at Villa, you avoid players like Asensio. You avoid players like Maatsen as well.
Yeah, the rotation.
Maatsen will be great. If the rotation is there, Maatsen will be great in Europe. He was hot shit when he was at Dortmund. Everybody wanted him. After he moved from Chelsea to Dortmund, he had a great season there. But again, when he moved back to Villa, he played 27 games, but he scored 4 points a game. Asensio did it over a shorter period of time. Looked great for 5 or 6 games, then looked like dog shit for 3 or 4 games. You can't afford to do that when you're drafting. You need, when you're looking that far down the list, you need to be looking at players who can consistently get you points. Asensio's not it, man.
Would you like to hear who the most wildcardy player mathematically on the Villa squad is? Last season, not the season just gone, but last season, he had as many weeks scoring minus points as positive points. And this season, he's Villa's 4th highest scorer.
Lucas Digne.
Correct, sir. How does that play out? Like, what the fuck is wrong with him?
He loves
it.
What was happening?
He loves a card.
He was crap. Then they signed Ian Maatsen for a lot of money. He woke up and went, you know what? I am pure class of football. I may as well remind everybody I'm pure class of football instead of just picking up my wages. If I want to keep playing and picking up these big wages, there's another fellow who wants to take my spot. So he woke the fuck up is what happened.
Was he at Everton before this?
He was.
Class at Everton until
he was brilliant at Everton.
Okay.
The same
so I thought that was going to be one of those stories where the guy goes to the bigger club and it turns out that he's a bit shit and he's never heard from again and we all laugh about it.
No, he was very good his first year at Everton first year at Villa, he was very good. Very good in his first year. Second year was cash. And then last year...
He's 3 years there. Okay.
Yeah, he's in his 3rd or 4th year even now, maybe.
I think this is season 4 there, but I think he was injured at one point as well. He didn't do too much. I think he missed 6 or 7 games at one point. But
he also gives me a whiff of the Luke Shaws about him, and Dean will know what I mean here. That Luke Shaw's that kind of fella that he plays class. Then it's like I have no competition. He goes into his little fat pocket, eats all the snacks. They go and buy a new fullback. He wakes up and goes, I suppose if I want to keep getting my bonus money for my snacks, I'm going to play some football. Shows everybody's class again, sees off the competition, and repeats that fucking cycle over and over again. He's one of those type.
In there as well.
We're getting close here to talking about the greatest player that ever was. If we're talking about United backs and lots of injury, send one up for Phil Jones.
Are we? Greatest
Seems to be a
headed
great
clearance
place
in
to do
Premier
that
League
sort of
history.
thing. Old Trafford seems to be a great place to hang out and do nothing for years.
Yeah. So
But
that's
then-
Villa. That is Villa
That's
who we look at. So yeah, you're looking at Rodgers and Tielemans to pick. You're avoiding Asensio, and Mings is someone you need to consider, particularly if he drops into the later rounds of the draft.
Great
That
call,
is
Gar.
it for this week.
Where is it done for this week?
Huh?
No,
So
No, just no.
I was going to say,
I'm
well
not
done,
calling it
Gary.
that.
Great work, Gary. Now turn off the camera and close your dressing gown. We'll see you next week.
I'm going to turn up in a dressing gown next week just for that.
Pat yourself down, call yourself a good boy, and that is it for Gary's Corner.
Subscribe to OnlyFans. No.
Speaking of subscribe to hit and all that shit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to do that part now. You know, the whole wrapping up part where it's like, head over to Statr.com. Jimmy has an article on those midfielders that are really forwards and how the point system works. As I said earlier, we have an article on all of the fixtures for every Premier League squad coming up next year. We have things like the best and easiest and worst run-ins for the first 6 games for every team. So you can actually see that by rank. I did a little play around there. And then we're going to be putting in a Gary's picks. We're going to get those articles together for Gary's picks for each of the teams and have that as a rotating carousel over the next coming weeks. In terms of the app, we're getting really close. We're getting really close. So make sure you head it over to the website, StatrDraft.com, StatrDraft.com. Hit the waiting list. Oh, I burped at the wrong time. I was doing so well.
You're so close, John. So close.
Anyway, StatrDraft.com. That's where the articles are. That's where you can sign up to the waiting list. That's where you can keep on the mailing list, keep informed of how close we are. We want y'all playing fantasy draft style our way in the new season, where all of those defensive midfielders, actual footballers matter, shock and or horror.
And now that we
children,
and now that we know actually when the season is officially kicking off,
August 15th.
This is when you need to start organising your draft night, lads. You need to start getting your mates together and organising those draft nights, because it's gonna be here sooner than you think.
Pick a pub, buy the grub, jump into the back garden with a bag of cans, sit in your sitting room with a cigarette or something. I don't know. Cheese boards, depending on if you're fancy, depending on if you're a bag of cans, depending on if you're a pub, depending on if you're a barbecue person. I don't know how vegans like to draft. Yeah. Do they just sit there and eat carrots? Maybe. Who cares?
Who cares? But if you haven't, if you've never done it before, try it this season, because believe me, it is worth it.
I'm sure that there are people who are expecting me to answer on how vegans draft. I'm not a vegan, it's just a haircut. If you're in Limerick or Dublin, keep an eye out for some major draft events where we're going to be bringing the whole community together, and we're all going to be kicking off the leagues together, but more on that closer to the time. Yes. But for now, it's the 15th of August, and I, for one, cannot wait. I am tired of sitting here in front of blank spreadsheets every Saturday, pressing refresh. Nothing is happening. I'm starved. I need my numbers. Soon, my pretties. Soon.
And on that note, we outie.